Hello there. My name is Jasom Jensai, and welcome to this episode of streaming. I would say welcome to this episode because that's how I do for Star Wars Duels, but it never works with streaming. Anyways, welcome to my review of Bad Batch episode 13. If you've seen some other reviews, you know a lot of people didn't really like this episode. I kind of feel that way. I actually enjoyed this episode, but it demonstrates a really big problem that I have with Dave Filoni's writing as a whole. So, all of that I'm going to discuss in this episode. But before we get to that, we have the question of the stream, which is the name. Oh boy, this is not formatted correctly. I'll fix that later. Anyways, what is the name of the Broken Horn Syndicate's leader? So, I didn't want to put too much detail in the question, but I'll give you some hints. He operates mostly on Lothal. You see him in Rebels. He has green skin. There you go. That should be all you need to know if you know. It's a pretty hard one, I'd say, for this time. But yeah, so that's the question. If you get that right, you only get one guess. Only the first person to get it right gets the points. And you can't look it up. If you meet all of those criteria, you get 10 points. And again, you guys are falling really behind. Oh man, I'm blanking on his name. I think it's C, just the letter C. That guy, I might be remembering the wrong guy. I'm pretty sure it's you, though. If that's you and you're watching, make sure to leave a comment correcting me for how bad I am at remembering stuff, because I should not be doing that. But anyways, that guy, he's blowing you guys out of the water. I believe he already has 20 points, if not 30. So, and you guys have 0, so better get this one right. But back to Bad Batch episode 13. That's what I'm going to talk about for the bulk of the stream. The main purpose of it is episode 13. So, the label that a lot of people are discussing, and I feel like people talk around this too much. They talk about it being filler. And like they describe it as filler, they talk about it as filler, but a lot of them are like, oh yeah, we're not going to use that word though, because that's a mean word, and we don't want to say it. I'm critiquing it. It is a pretty filler episode. It doesn't accomplish much plot-wise. It accomplishes some stuff character-wise, which is important, but it doesn't really connect to the main plot. And this is something that, like, I see all the time, and people just forgive it. They're like, oh, it's just a filler episode. You kind of just got to pad out the runtime, you know? It's like, no, you don't have to pad out the runtime. A show should be as long as it needs to be. You don't need to add extra episodes. If you've got a 15-episode show idea, make 15 episodes. Don't make 16 episodes and throw in a filler episode. And before I start complaining and get too much onto, I don't know, just frustration with filler episodes, I want to describe why this episode is a filler episode. So it starts out, they arrive in Ord Mantell, they're talking about a mission, blah, 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 just showing that time has passed. Good exposition, by the way. I mean, not the best, but pretty good exposition. It didn't feel awkward at all, especially because they keep doing it. But anyways, they arrive on Ord Mantell, and they walk in, and they're like, oh no, Sid's not here. And that's the problem. Then throughout the episode, they like basically start solving this problem. They meet with Sid. Boom. You figure out where Sid is. She talks through the plan. They start doing the plan. They come up with, they see problems. They eventually run into eventually things go worse. Like the bugs attack. You know, they solve all those problems. At the end of the episode, they finally solve the problem. And that's the episode. It's a good story. You have a promise at the beginning. You have progress throughout it. And then you have the payoff at the end when, I almost called him Vizago. When Roland, what do you call it? Dang it, I'm blanking again. Okay, so when Roland finally, gets his horn cut off and all this stuff, and I should mention, I mean, it's not that kind of an episode, it's not super important, but there is spoilers for episode 13 in case it isn't obvious. So, yeah, it's a pretty filler episode, and because it's a good story, but it only accomplishes things within the episode. You could watch this episode with no context and be, oh yeah, it's a bunch of, warrior type people. I mean, obviously there's things you can pick up just because you know the characters well, but you don't need to know the plot of the other episodes at all. If you knew the characters but not the plot, if you knew the setting, the setting, the character, but nothing about the plot, this episode would be just as enjoyable because it doesn't affect the plot at all. We don't see Crosshair. We don't see Omega. We don't figure out anything about Omega. We see Omega, obviously. We don't it's self-contained, completely self-isolated. And that's why it's filler. Because it doesn't improve the plot at all. So, one of the bigger problems I have with filler episodes in the Bad Batch specifically is because they're so prevalent. By episode 3, I was talking about filler episodes. That shouldn't happen. You don't like if let me think. So episode 3, I believe episode 2 they go to meet with Cutler Payne. Thinking back on that, that could totally be a filler episode. I mean, to be honest, I haven't watched in a while. They probably mentioned some stuff, but that could have been just put in episode, like, whichever one is not filler. Episode, I think it's 5 is the next one that's not completely filler. 4 is arguable, but maybe just add a third episode where you set up the things instead of just having it spread out over so many episodes. I'm getting off topic, but basically, episode 3, the Bad Batch do pretty much nothing. Again, they have a problem. Their ship is damaged. They finally solve it at the end of the episode. It doesn't connect with anything else. Now, in that episode, there was a bunch of stuff with Crosshair. That was good. I liked that. But why even show the Bad Batch? You don't need to show them. And this has been seen in, well, I think my favorite example that's not part of the show is in Avatar: The Last Airbender with the episode Zuko Alone. It is literally about the bad guy. Like, none of the main characters, none of them show up. Not even Uncle Iroh. It's Zuko and a bunch of villagers. You could argue it's filler. Actually, it kind of is filler, but I love it. It's great character development. Which, actually, that brings me to another point or about why it might not be filler, is because one of the big arcs in Avatar: The Last Airbender is, and by the way, spoilers, is Zuko's redemption arc. And that's a big part of that arc. So you could argue it's not filler. In Bad Batch, we don't know. We can't look back in hindsight. We don't know what's filler. But from what I can tell, and honestly, this is another big problem with this show, is I don't really know what the purpose is. I don't know what the goal is at the end. I don't know what to look forward to other than a battle on Kamino with Crosshair, maybe? Take out Crosshair? I don't know. And you shouldn't know exactly, but you should have an idea. And I just have no idea. The other thing is, I don't know how many seasons this is going to go. So there's that too. Basically, yeah, so I don't know what's going to happen. So I can't really judge if this is filler. This totally could be filler if it's trying to develop, like, the relationship between Sid and the Bad Batch. And that's the whole climax. But then that would mean that, like, 12 episodes before it, obviously there's some development there, but they're mostly filler then. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard to judge whether this is filler at this point. But I do think it's filler based on what I've seen from the other episodes, because it doesn't really mesh well with them. So yeah, that's why I believe it's filler. And here's why it's a problem, is because it's so prevalent and it's like just repeated over and over. And this is why in the thumbnail I have, and maybe I might change this like in a few years or something, probably not, but it's possible. You can change thumbnails pretty easily. I have in the thumbnail the problem with Dave Filoni. And the thing with thumbnails is you can't really put too many words, otherwise it's small and people can't read it. So the problem with Dave Filoni is specifically a problem with his writing. I don't have any personal problem with him or anything, but I definitely don't have any personal problem. I don't know. So obviously, but I do have a problem with his writing in its filler episodes. He just has them everywhere. Like in Rebels, tons of filler episodes. You take out those filler episodes, it's a great show. Look at The Mandalorian. You take out those filler episodes, like so good. Like a baby Yoda, oh my goodness, like, oh, brilliant idea. I would never have thought of that. It's awesome. And that sets up so much. We kind of understand the plot of that show because we see Baby Yoda and we see the Mandalorian. We know, oh, Baby Yoda, very important. We have a Mandalorian who must protect Baby Yoda because protect the baby, right? It's instinctual in all of us. So that's why that ties into what I was saying earlier, how I don't know what the end goal or the meaning or the, I guess, purpose of the Bad Batch is, because it's just unclear. Is it Omega? I just don't know. It could be Omega, it could be Crosshair, it could be a whole lot of things. It could be Kamino, I don't know. But yeah, so without like a driving purpose, it's just a bunch of cool episodes. Right. What was I talking about? Right, filler episodes. So yeah, you take out the filler episode, Mandalorian is awesome. Look at even season 7 of the Clone Wars, which is like, so many people just thought it was brilliant. You start with 4-episode arc, pretty long arc for the Clone Wars, which is why everyone loves it, because the longer the arc is, pretty much always better. Which is part of the reason why I think Rebels I don't think it's quite as good as Clone Wars, but I think it competes because it's focused on just the Rebels, whereas the Clone Wars occasionally has episodes of like Padme and Jar Jar. There's an episode with Padme and Jar Jar. You have an episode with Jar Jar and Mace Windu. You have a 4-episode arc, or I should say 2 episodes with Jar Jar and Master and Mace. You have a 4-episode arc with like R2-D2, a red astromech, a green astromech. I think there's another astromech. I'm not sure though. And then you have a pit droid and a green small guy who goes inside the green astromech. And they have a 4-episode arc. It's a bit of a drag, but Clone Wars makes mistakes too. So yeah, Dave Filoni has always had a pretty big problem with filler. You could argue, even George Lucas did with The Phantom Menace. A lot of people say, oh, it's not really that important. And sure, it sets up important things, but like I was saying, you can take those tiny elements that they introduce and just fit them into Attack of the Clones or an in-between movie. Because obviously you want a trilogy. You don't want to have you just don't want to have 2 movies. That's stupid. Right, so, or you could, I guess, spice up the plot a bit. Because the other thing you could do is you could make those not filler by having a more grand goal, or, I don't know, just adding a subplot that spans multiple episodes. But yeah, it's filler if it's just a subplot that takes 1 episode and ends with that episode and doesn't connect to the main plot. So that's my rant about fillerness and the problem with Filoni's writing. And I kind of wish, I don't know. I don't know what I wish if he would like watch my stuff and learn from it or something. Because I feel like me telling this is just like, it's not the pot calling the kettle black. It's like the baby cub telling the adult lioness how to hunt. It's like, sure, I know a little bit, and you could argue, yeah, I may be right about this, but there's so much more that, I'm sure he just thinks about that I can't even comprehend. So, I don't know. I do want to mention that I don't think I'm like a much better writer than him or anything. But I do feel like this is a fair critique, and you should be able to critique. I feel like you should be able to critique your whatever shows you watch. That's part of the, I guess, part of shows is hoping that people will think about it and not just mindlessly watch it and be like, oh wow, good animation. Which, by the way, good animation, but you want them to think about the story, and at least I would if I was writing story. I would want people to think about my story and critique it. And I don't know, maybe I don't know if I'd want everyone to tell me their critiques. That might be a bit overwhelming and a lot of chaos, and you wouldn't know which ones are good advice and bad advice, but I don't know. So that's my rant about filler episodes and Dave Filoni's writing. But that's pretty much all I have to say about this episode, honestly. Like, not that much happened. Sure, stuff happened, but it wasn't like, it's not plot connected stuff that's happening. It's just stuff that's happening. So, I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the chat or in the comments. But I think that's probably it for this episode. So, yeah. So, see you next time. Goodbye, old friends.